Welcome back to Dan Recaps. Today, I'm going to explain the movie Karate Warrior 2, released in the year 1988. The movie begins with a guy named Scott practicing martial arts on his boat. When Scott heads inside to change his sweaty outfit, he receives a call from his girlfriend. She invites him over, but he says he can't because he's headed to his grandparents for his birthday party. She is upset that he didn't invite her, so Scott apologizes, but brushes it off, saying his birthday is not very important anyway. He says goodbye and gets on his bike to head for his grandparents' place. In a hurry, he accidentally steps on someone else's car, who starts to chase him. Luckily, Scott manages to hide behind a bush while the guys drive by him in a rush. Finally, he reaches his grandparents' place and is welcomed with a surprise birthday party, and his grandma offers him a cake. As he cuts himself a piece, he discovers keys inside. They have given him a car for his birthday to make it easier for him to get to college. Scott goes to check it out and sees it is a red sports car and asks to try it out, which his grandpa approves. While on the road, Scott comes across a black car, which he proudly overtakes using his sweet new ride. However, in the black car is a group called the Tigers, and their leader, Anderson, is driving with his girlfriend, Patty. Anderson is annoyed by this kid showing off and chases him down, running him off the road and into a ditch. Later, Scott spots a guy named Luke and asks him for a lift. Luke is reluctant at first, but agrees on the condition that he and Scott become friends. As they move on, Luke warns Scott to keep away from the Tigers since they are dangerous. Luke then asks Scott where he plans to live when college begins, but Scott still hasn't found a place. Since Luke's mom is almost always away on business trips, he invites Scott to live with him since he is mostly alone. Scott barely has a chance to answer him when he spots the Tiger's car. He then tells Luke to stop the car, who parks a safe distance away since he fears the Tigers. The two then head to Anderson's gym, where a bunch of people are training in martial arts, but Anderson is not there. Luke suggests they check to see if he's at their hangout place next door. Finding Anderson there, Scott confidently confronts him, telling him to pay for the damage to his car, but Anderson just makes fun of him. When Anderson tells his guys to throw him out, Scott uses his karate skills to stop them. Anderson then tries to escalate things, but Scott doesn't want to fight. Luke then picks him up and congratulates him for his sick moves, as he had never seen anyone stand up to the Tigers before. The guys then head to Luke's place and have some drinks, since there is no food in the house. When Scott finds a gun in one of the drawers, Luke tells him it belonged to his father, who was a Marine, but he had died when he was 3. Luke goes on to explain that no one cares about him, not even his mom, an author who is always on tour. The next day, Scott reports to the school to register, where he bumps into Mr. Robson, who escorts him into his office. There, Scott finds an old picture taken 23 years ago with his dad in it, and Mr. Robson confirms that was his class back then too. In the school field, Anderson finds out that his father was expelled from school because of Scott's dad, and the group sets out to find Scott. They soon find him, and Scott runs away to avoid a fight, but they follow him into a storage area. Anderson challenges him to a fight, but when he refuses, they all start to beat on him. But when a school employee appears, the Tigers get scared and run off. Later, a badly injured Scott gets into Luke's car, who feels really bad for him. Scott asks Luke to find out more about what happened between his and Anderson's fathers. He also reveals he can't fight them like this because he made a promise to his master to not fight in unfair competitions. But after the beating today, Scott is fed up and asks Luke to arrange a fair fight between him and Anderson at the college. They later spot Patty, Anderson's girlfriend, and Scott takes her somewhere quiet to have a talk. Scott asks her to be his friend and points out that Anderson doesn't seem like her type, but Patty just asks him to watch out for the Tigers, as they can be ruthless. Later that day, Luke approaches the Tigers and challenges Anderson to a fight on behalf of Scott, who agrees. But when a woman mentions seeing Scott and Patty leave in a car together, Anderson gets angry. Meanwhile, Scott drops Patty off at home and asks her out once more, but she declines and Scott leaves. Not long after, the Tigers arrive at Patty's house and Anderson insults her, accusing her of cheating. He even goes so far as to break up with her right then and there. Back at Luke's house, he explains the story of the incident between Scott and Anderson's dads. Luke explains that when Anderson's father was drunk, he had attempted to sexually harass a woman. Scott's dad came to her rescue, and Anderson's father got expelled from school. Luke goes on to ask how he can be sure it'll be a fair fight since Anderson might try to fight dirty. Scott gets the idea that if there are a lot of people watching, Anderson would have to fight fair. To help with their plan, Luke tracks down a radio journalist he knows to spread the word, and he agrees to help them. Back at the gym, while Anderson is training, he hears an announcement on the radio for a big fight. Realizing the radio host is talking about their fight, one of the Tigers comes up with the idea to have Scott's towel soaked with chloroform to make him dizzy during the fight. In the next scene, we see a large number of people turning up for the fight while Scott and Anderson head for the stage. Anderson has a huge following, but Patty seems worried about Scott. As the fight begins, the energetic Scott easily knocks out Anderson in the first round. As they take a timeout, the Tigers' plan is set in motion, and chloroform is sprayed onto a sponge to be used on Scott. After Scott uses it to clean his face, he begins to feel dizzy, and in the next round, Anderson easily knocks him out. Luke is shocked and moves towards Scott to find out what's happening. This prevents the cut man from reapplying the chloroform to Scott, and in the third round, Scott regains his senses and Anderson is in for a beating again. Scott remembers a technique called the stroke of the dragon, which he uses to finish off Anderson, and he is announced the winner. Scott wakes up 40 hours later because of the effect of the chloroform and sees Luke there offering him a drink. When he's feeling better, Scott asks Patty to have another talk. She initially declines, but then says she would think about it. In the next scene, Anderson and another member of the Tigers come up with a new idea. They plan to find karate legend Mark Sanders and offer him cash to beat up Scott. When they find him, they discover that it was Mark who initially formed the Tigers a few years earlier, and he is surprised the group still exists. Anderson lets him in on their plan, and after hearing about the money, Mark agrees. He then goes and confronts Luke, telling him to send a message to Scott that he wants to meet. Luke asks Scott not to go, but he is determined. Later that night, Scott heads to the meeting point where he is immediately attacked by Mark. Mark is very aggressive and overwhelms Scott, but suddenly, Luke shows up with his father's gun, but is too scared to fire. As Mark attacks Luke instead, Patty pulls up in her car and tells Scott to get in. She drives away, but Scott tells her to go back for Luke. When the Tigers arrive, Anderson tells Scott he must fight with Mark in exchange for Luke's life, so Scott accepts the challenge. In the next scene, we see Luke in an ambulance being rushed to the hospital due to his serious injuries. Patty asks Scott to call the police to stop the fight, but Scott says he needs to take revenge on Mark for hurting Luke. Later, Scott sends a letter to his former master, Kimura, thanking him for all he has taught him. He soon receives a call from Kimura saying he is at the airport, so Scott heads there to pick him up. The next day, the teacher and students set out in a boat as Kimura teaches him how to use his spirit in his fight with Mark. Kimura is disappointed to see that Scott has forgotten almost everything he taught him, so he forces him to practice more and meditate. After a long training exercise, Scott is finally ready for the fight. On the day of the fight, the auditorium is full of people anticipating the big fight. Luke is seen listening to the radio from the hospital, which is covering the fight live. In the first round, the fighters square up, but neither is injured. However, during the break, Scott tells his master that Mark is too strong and he can't win. Kimura, however, believes in him and tells him to stop fighting like a coward. During the second round, Mark goes hard on Scott, who gets injured as they go into the next break. That's when Kimura asks him to use the stroke of the dragon. The third round is heavily contested as both fight for their lives. Meanwhile, we see Luke in the hospital, hoping Scott can take down Mark. Finally, Scott gets a chance to use the stroke of the dragon and knocks out Mark. Scott is announced the winner, Overjoyed, Luke almost hurts himself celebrating Scott's victory in the hospital bed. In the locker room after the fight, Patty confesses she had little faith in Scott, but Kimura was so optimistic about Scott winning that he even bet a huge amount of money on him. Disappointed that they lost, two of the Tigers confront Scott, but a single punch from Kimura is enough to put them down. The movie ends as the three of them set out to celebrate, as Patty finally kisses Scott. That was all from the video. Subscribe for more content like this, and leave a like to help the channel out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Take care,